Hi, I'm Sam Edith.
And I'm Amy Nelson. Welcome to What's Her Story with Sam and Amy.
This is a show about the world's most remarkable women, their professional and personal journey.
Together, we'll hear from gold medalists, best-selling authors, and leaders of the world's most iconic brands.
Listen every Thursday or join the conversation anytime on Instagram at What's Her Story Podcast.
You probably know famed stylist Stacy London as co-host of TLC's hit makeover show, What Not to Wear, which landed her squarely in the heart of TV stardom. What you might not know is that she's now taking the middle-aged market by storm with her new company, the State of Menopause. So, Stacy, you have said that what a person wears can be very symptomatic of what is going on with them. So what are you wearing?
Mm-hmm. Right now, I'm wearing actually a Kuhl turtleneck, and it's not one of those Nora Ephron moments of like, I hate my neck, so I'm trying to hide it. It's the comfiest shirt that I have, and I love stripes. So I was like, I'm going to wear this today. It also kind of goes with my white streak in my hair, somehow, strangely, navy and white, black and white. So yeah, that's what I'm wearing. It's actually it feels like very cheery, and turtlenecks in general remind me of elementary school because we had a uniform, and the woman who makes this turtleneck went to elementary school with me, so it's like a double whammy. Her name is Nikki Kuhl, and the line is called Kuhl, but we have pictures of us from being 6 years old wearing turtlenecks, so it all comes full circle. Yeah, isn't that funny?
Where did you grow up? You grew up in New York, right?
I grew up in Manhattan. Yeah, I'm one of those weird rare birds that was born on the island.
Me too.
Oh my God, Sam, I didn't know that. Yeah. Where did you go to school?
Dalton.
Oh, you were my arch rival. I went to Trinity.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know half your school. I really like Trinity, actually. It's so funny because I was just, well, we can talk about this after. But so what Amy's question sort of brings us to is, do you feel pressure when you're out and about that you always have to be wearing the perfect thing, or that you were critiquing what people wore for so long on television? It kind of puts you in this spot where you always have to be wearing the perfect thing.
Yeah, look, first of all, in terms of What Not to Wear or Love, Lust, or Run, or any of the makeovers that I've done on any television show, that's part of me. That's a persona. And that came from years of, being an assistant to some of the greatest fashion editors in the world. And then learning to work with real people on commercials, not 6 foot tall, 100 models, but real people who were like in bank commercials, or kids, or men. And that was also part of my experience. So getting to What Not to Wear really was a very interesting time for me, specifically because, one, I didn't know it was going to be so popular, and that people would start going like this with like a super lens looking at whatever I was wearing, to the point where I walked out of my house once to go to the gym, and this woman sort of snapped her neck around and was like, "You're not allowed to wear sweats." And I was like, "But I'm going to the gym, so it's pretty appropriate, right?" Like, it does match the occasion, unlike a lot of what, people were wearing on the show. And the only thing that I would say is, like, look, What Not to Wear, we did critique, but I do like to think of it as constructive criticism, partly because it was like, we were never saying, wow, you look awful, and leave it there, right? We were like, is this getting you where you want to be? Is this the most flattering for your body type? Let us show you some alternatives, right? Criticism is criticism if you're just saying, wow, you look lousy. But constructive criticism is when you're offering alternatives to, whatever the present situation is. So yes, okay, to get back to your original question, I don't feel that kind of pressure anymore, right? I'm 52 years old. I've already done all of this. Clothing for me is much more about self-expression now than it has ever been. And I even sometimes think, looking back, we were a little too rigid in our rules on what not to wear. And there were a lot of free spirits that came on that frankly, in this day and age, we're not in the early aughts anymore, 20 years since the show's inception. I would say I regret some of those things, because I really believe now that personal expression sort of supersedes any rules that might apply, right? I still believe that what you wear is a narrative, and you can control that narrative. And people are going to judge you whether I tell you whether you look good or not, right? We make judgments about people in the first 3 seconds. That is our prehistoric, archaic brain at work. So it's fight, flight, or freeze, right? When somebody sees you. But it's not about your life or death situation. Now, those opinions are whether or not you're a friend in terms of, oh, we speak the same visual language, or you're a foe, or you scare me, or we're not running away from saber-toothed tigers, or woolly mammoths, but we are sort of still negotiating the world in the same way. And style now, I always talk about the fact that when I started What Not to Wear, it was about how to, right? You wanted experts to show you how to do things. And I certainly qualify as an expert. I've been doing something in style or television since I was 19 years old. That's more than 10,000 hours worth of experience to qualify yourself as an expert. But nobody cares about expertise anymore because we don't live in that kind of world anymore. We live in a Me Too world, which is not, when I say that, I don't mean it in terms of the more serious hashtag that is associated with Me Too, but I mean it in the sense that now that we have social media and that anybody with any kind of account who is literally posting every day an outfit of the day can become a fashion icon, right? And that's all based on the idea that people feel this sense of autonomy over what they're wearing. So when they see somebody's style that they like, they follow them simply because they're like, me too. I like that style. Me too. Not that you need me to show you how to do it, right? There's much more of this sense of shared experience rather than the need for expertise. Now, granted, I still think experts are necessary, like especially pilots, anywhere where anybody's life is in danger. But when you're talking about style, we're not needed in the same way. What we were trying to do on that show, originally TLC was the learning channel, right? That was really about instruction. And that's not the way that I see style, or the way that, I see young people approaching style now. You didn't
Well, that's
have
also why,
people.
I mean, it's also why you really can't second guess how you critiqued people on that show, right? Because it might not have been a hit then if you had said any form of self-expression is great. I mean,
Right.
realistically,
It's
people
worthwhile.
wanted the rules. Yeah, people wanted those
Right.
rules. They wanted that persona.
And I completely agree with you. The thing is that I still think that there will always be people who are looking for guidance, right? We know lots of people who will hire personal stylists or use personal shoppers when they're at department stores or things like that. That's never going to go away. But for me personally, I really feel like my evolution has been such a drastic change over the last 20 years that I look back and I'm like, oh, I would have done things differently knowing what I know now. But of course, you can only say that in hindsight. What is interesting to me is that when you look at the way people talk about style today, it's, younger people are talking about style in a completely different way. When you look at the kind of systemic dismantling of race, of gender, these are things that are absolutely impacting the way we think about style, the way we think about clothing being gendered. These are
Mhm.
things that were not conversations 20 years ago. They weren't even conversations 5 years ago. So we're in a position to do something new with style that was not really available to us, that we didn't have language for before. It's actually a super exciting time for fashion. Also, just in terms of the fact that we're starting to lift up people of different ethnicities and genders that were never, even considered in fashion. Fashion was a very elitist white industry, and that is changing by the second.
Who are some really interesting voices that you look to now on fashion?
Oh, that's a great question. Alok Volkman, I think, is an incredible, incredible guide in
Mhm.
terms of their journey and what fashion means. Janaya the Future is also somebody who I think is absolutely incredible, and the way they style themselves is really incredible. Then I'm obsessed with Katie Storino, who I think does the most incredible, make my size campaigns, but also does these wonderful, like, supersize the look, where she'll take somebody who's sort of more well known and copy their outfit. And it's never about who wore it better for her. It's about the fact that you can wear anything at any size. And that's a
Mhm.
huge thing that's gone on really more in the last 10 years, this idea of body positivity, that,
Right.
to embrace style does not mean you have to be a size two. It means that you can be any size and find your style. So, those are people that I look to who I think are much more modern in the way that they are talking about style, in the way that they are expressing their own style. I mean, oh my God, I could go on and on and on. Harry Styles, I think, is like such an incredible style icon who has admitted to the fact that he loves to play with the quote unquote feminine when it comes
Mhm.
to his own style. So, there's a new generation of what fashion icons look like. And certainly not just like I'm not looking to these people to teach me how to dress. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the kind of social impact that they're having for younger generations. And even on Queer Eye, right? Those guys are doing something very different than what the original Queer Eye for the Straight Guy did, which was, a
Mhm.
great hook back in the day. But now this is about they're really tackling bigger issues. They are looking at racism. They are looking at economic injustice. We are talking about style in a much broader social sense and cultural sense, which to me is super important. And as I said before, I do believe you control this narrative. So the way that you present, you better have something to say, right? I don't make the rules. People are going to judge you. So you get to decide how you want to present and what you want to say about yourself without ever opening your mouth. I just want you to get what you want out of your life. And if dressing a certain way is going to help you get there, that's great. I didn't make the rules, but I want you to win.
Mhm.
Stacy, let's get back to your story. So tell us about those early years, pre What Not to Wear. You were working in the cutthroat world of magazines. What was that journey like for you?
Well, it was a really, it was a very interesting one, right? I started my first job straight out of college was as an assistant at Vogue to both Phyllis Posnick and Andre Leon Talley, who just passed away. And it was a really interesting journey for me because I was 21 years old. I was kind of didn't know what I was getting myself into. I kind of got thrown, it's like sink or swim with a bunch of sharks. But I always talk about it as military training. Like it was boot camp for life. The words impossible in 1991 did not exist. So whatever had to happen to make a shoot happen, to make a prop, to find a prop or to fly a model from anywhere in the world to get her to a shoot on time, nothing mattered. Nothing was impossible. And for me, that was a great life lesson going forward. Is like, when people sort of give you this attitude of like, nah, can't be done, that's the first thing you should not accept as an answer, right? The minute somebody like poo poos you is the minute you got to dig in your
I
heels
agree,
and
and
get
Amy
done.
agrees too. But now, Stacey, that you're a CEO, you realize that very, very few people you work with have that mentality.
Yeah. And you know what? I actually try to surround myself with the people who do have that
Yeah.
mentality. And not only that, I mean, being a CEO is very different from being talent in the sense that I am always trying to find people who are smarter than me. I do not want to be the
Mhm.
smartest person in the room. I didn't mind if I was the smartest person in the room while giving a talk on fashion, but not as the CEO of a company. Everybody who surrounds me has to be way smarter than I am. Like that's how things get done.
Do you think, I mean, how do you think, how to put this? Do you think in
Mhm.
today's work environment and the way, you know, we look at CEOs and how, and just the dynamic that we have today, like, could the Vogue you work at exist today? Does it exist today?
No, it can't. And in fact, there are so many things about, print magazines. I mean, there's so few of them, right? They all
Mhm.
need digital platforms. In a lot of ways, I think that print felt that it was so far superior. When I left magazines to go into television, I can't tell you how many editors said, "Oh, I'm so sorry you couldn't make it in magazines." And
Mhm.
then I was like, "Oh God, I mean, I'm really doing something wrong here." I don't know, maybe TV is really the wrong move. Um, Only to find 5 years later that people were, like, desperate to get jobs like the one I had, right? All these editors suddenly realized, like, television was the place to be, and I will tell you that I completely miscalculated when I started to get, much more success as I, kept doing What Not to Wear.
Mhm.
Then I started to do Oprah and The Today Show and Access Hollywood, and then I got, I was the spokesperson for Pantene and Woolite and Dr. Scholl's and, Lee Jeans. I mean, it was pretty insane, that kind of meteoric rise, to get to do all of these things. I wasn't paying attention in the rearview mirror to the fact that my agents were now starting to sign bloggers. And what did
Mhm.
bloggers become? influencers, right? I had no idea of what the digital revolution and the social media revolution was going to do, not just to my career, but the way that I was no longer viewed for having taken a chance on a new version of it, of the fashion industry, to go from print to television. I really did not calculate how massive the jump from television to digital and social media platforms was going to be. I feel behind. I'm always behind when it comes to that stuff now.
Well,
I feel like I'm too old.
how did it impact you? So post What Not to Wear, you walk out the door, and what awaited you?
Well, I spent a year developing a syndicated talk show that got bought but never made, that was called The Find. And that was about, it was like sort of based on the idea of The View, right? Five different women, all of different ages, colors, sizes, all with different areas of specialty, right? So mine was fashion. We had somebody who was interiors. We had a tech person. We had a finance person. But the idea was that it was a shopping show. And so everything that you saw on the show and everything we talked about was for sale, and that you could buy it all on a second screen app. We developed that technology to do it. We were probably about 15 to 20 years too early. But now you see things like Talk Shop Live that are trying to recreate what we had built for this television show. And that was actually one of the most disappointing things for me, was that show, I think, had such potential, and disappointed that everybody thought it was too complicated at that time. And then I went on to do Love Luster Run for 3 seasons, which was very much, if you are going to interview for a very serious corporate banking job at an old heritage, banking firm, chances are you should wear the pinstripe suit, right? But if you are going to interview to be a dominatrix, go ahead and wear the latex cat suit, right? It's like,
Mhm.
are you projecting the image that you want in order to get what you want out of other people and your life? And I think that we tend to minimize how much that first visual impact has on the way that people perceive us.
So take us to 2017,
Yeah.
2016. What happened in your life? I know that you hit a financial speed bump.
Oh, I hit so many speed bumps in 2016 and 2017. It's kind of, I don't even know where to start, right? One of the things, and I've gotten a lot of criticism for this, was that I wrote this article for Refinery 29, where I had wanted to talk about this kind of this sense of falling from grace, right? Having
Mhm.
been in the public eye and really having had quite a quick ascent in terms of being sort of a known personality in a way that I wasn't ready for. But sort of, I always had this idea in the back of my head, my career in my life was going to be linear, right? So I got to this stage in my career and I thought, I'll just stay there. I didn't know that, you know, audiences are fickle, that television executives are fickle, that people might stop thinking, wow, Stacy's the person we want. Look at this new cool girl that we want, right? It never
Right.
occurred to me that I hadn't set myself up in a way that was allowing me to kind of have continued success, even if that success looked like something different, even if that success wasn't in television, even if that success was then to write a series of books, right? I've written a couple, but that I had could have made that my full-time occupation, or I could have done a podcast, or any of the things that I sort of was like, no, no, I'm a television person. And I kept waiting for something to happen to me. I kept waiting for somebody to come to me to fix what I felt was sort of the loss of this career, or that it was starting to fade. And nobody did. Right. And so at the end of, I started to realize, like, wow, I have been spending money the way that I was making money, right? In enough money to never really think, oh, I should be worrying about my finances. Now, that's not to say that I didn't save money. Of course I did. I was very smart when I was young. I got a good financial advisor. I've always invested, and I believe very much in having financial independence. But I
Mhm.
just didn't realize that everything sort of career wise was going to get so fuzzy and blurry and complicated for me in a way that I couldn't see what the next step forward should be. So I wrote this article about the fact that, I went to see my accountant who said to me, wow, if you don't really sort of course correct here, you are going to be broke eventually. Like, you can't live like this forever. And it really struck me. Now, what I said in the next sentence of that article was, I don't mean broke, right? But everybody really took issue with the fact that I'd said that my accountant said that I was going to go broke. But basically, what he meant was, you cannot live the lifestyle that you have been living for the last
Sure.
15 years. You have to
Everything's
start
relative,
being
right?
right. And so for me, it was, again, another lesson that I needed to learn that, sure, of course, in hindsight, I wish I'd learned earlier. But this idea that you can be very successful in your career, and then there is, you hit a certain age where there is the real potential for decrease in your earning potential, that you're not going to be able to sustain the same kind of income that you have for, maybe your 30s and 40s. There are a lot of women who become much more successful and become, they've been on the same track to get the corner office and, retire or sit on boards, or all of the things that we think that way modern women of a certain age start to kind of become so respected or create passive wealth for themselves. And I'd never really thought about that, because all of the things that I'd ever done, that I was hired to do, right? I was, work for hire. I didn't own anything. I wasn't making passive income from anything. I hadn't really thought that that was ever going to be necessary for me. So that was really the first thing that I had to take stock of. One, how am I spending money? Two, how am I making money if I'm not the flavor of the month or the year or the decade anymore, right? Like, what does that look like for me? And that was also, that was a big death of ego moment. I, spent a lot of time. I wouldn't say that I've always been the most confident person in the world, but definitely when it came to my career, I felt like I was very good at what I did. And to kind of see that being taken away from me without having a say made me very angry. It made me feel like, but I'm so good at this. I'm so talented. Everybody knows me for this, right? So you got to kind of let your ego die in order to get past that, in order to say, like, wow, okay, I'm the cat's meow to myself. Like, my sense of self cannot be rocked by what other people think or feel about me, can't be rocked by whether other people are hiring me or not hiring me. But to get to that place, you have to go through the pain of sort of not being wanted. And I did. I really did. And part of that pain, I don't think that there's a direct connection between sort of that kind of death of ego, and the kind of psychology that that required.
So then in 2016, you dealt with a massive spine surgery. What led to that?
Yes. December of 2016, I had like massive spine surgery where, I mean, it could be argued my body fell apart because I'd just been going and going and going and going. I'd never stopped working. I was always in my head. I was never took care of myself physically. I would run in 5-inch high heels for 12 hours a day. I wasn't taking care of my body in any way that would allow for me to recognize that something was really wrong until it was almost too late. So I had that massive spine surgery, and as I was recovering from that, which took about 18 months, you know, a lot of other things started to go wrong. I was really feeling, I started to experience like very strange mood things, and I attributed it all to the surgery, right? When you have heart, brain, or spine surgery, doctors will tell you that your body kind of goes into shock because it thinks it's going to die, right? And when you come, my body doesn't know on any kind of cellular level that I decided to have that surgery, right? So your body is reacting in the way it would react as if you were in an accident or anything else.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, the first time I saw all that metal, all that foreign material in my body, I was terrified. And not just terrified, I was anxious and moody. And I kept saying at the time, I feel like something is eating me alive from the inside. Ever since I saw that x ray, I was so flipped out. And my brain started to do this kind of mental gymnastics where I was constantly trying to find reasons for things that felt really wrong to me. And I attributed everything to the surgery, that it was just physically traumatic. And therefore, it sort of triggered an emotional response, a physical response. And really that there was a kind of grief in knowing that, I'd gotten to this stage of my life and my body wasn't as strong as it used to be when I was young. There's a lot of saying goodbye, right, as we age. And then I think as I really started to kind of feel stronger from that, I went through a lot of physical therapy. I felt, physically stronger, mentally stronger. My dad got very sick, and I spent the better part of 2018 taking care of him with my family until he passed away. And then I had a whole other set of symptoms that I thought was the physical manifestation of grief: food allergies, skin rashes, heart palpitations, all of these things that I attributed to the way that he had gotten sick. He had a heart disease and he would get skin rashes, and he was, having trouble keeping food down. And all of a sudden, so was I. I was like, since when am I allergic to salmon? And, just these weird things. But in between those 2 years, I just thought, oh, this is the physical manifestation of like pain, anxiety, and fear, or the
Mhm.
physical manifestation of grief. But those 2 years were probably the worst years that I was actually experiencing perimenopause. And those two symptoms, I mean, those two things that happened probably amplified my symptoms dramatically. But I didn't know anything about menopause. I thought it was optional. I didn't know it was coming for me. I didn't know what age you got it at. I didn't know anything about it. And so a lot of the things that I was
Hold
feeling,
on, Stacey.
certainly
I
in the
want to ask
physical,
Amy. Amy, do you know what age menopause happens?
So I know when my mom went through menopause, but that's really the
Mhm.
only woman I've ever talked about it deeply with.
Well, that's
We
first of
never
all
talk
the
about it.
kind,
Like I don't
you
know
know,
anything about it. I mean, I know it's coming. Like you go down a roller coaster, but I don't know when that
Yeah.
dip is gonna happen, right?
well,
Yeah,
I
me
mean,
never.
Amy, yeah, Amy is right. I mean, the clearest genetic predictor of when you'll have menopause is when your mom had it. Not everybody's mom is alive. My mom had a radical hysterectomy much younger than when she would have gone into chronological menopause. So, I did not find, she didn't even really talk to me about it, right? I
Mhm.
realized that, most women don't talk about it. Most moms don't feel comfortable talking about it. It is the one uh, stage of, sort of female hormonal health that is not discussed, as if it is some icky, dark, scary subject. And the only way
Mhm.
to make things less icky and dark and scary is to shine a light on them. And once I realized that that's what I was dealing with, and once I realized that my doctors were actually not that helpful in this regard, I went to my GP, who's known me since I was 23 years old, and I was like, I feel crazy. Now I have night sweats, I have brain fog, I have insomnia, I have hot flashes, I have anxiety, I have depression, I have meno rage. I was like, all the 34 symptoms you can have, I think I had all 34 and then some. The muscle fatigue, the breast tenderness, the joint pain, the hair breakage, the skin like that felt like sandpaper. I was like, I don't look like myself, I don't feel like myself. Help. And she said to me, well, you have autoimmune diseases, and I'm not going to recommend that you go on hormones. So, you'll get through it. Well, how am I going to get through it? How do I get through it? I went to my gynecologist, and she said to me, use it or lose it. When I was like, I don't feel comfortable having sex, and sex is painful, and I have no interest in sex. And she was like, yeah, use it or lose it. I'm like, what does that mean? And how are you helping me? And this is when I started to do my homework, right? Just about the same time, this company called State of Menopause came to me and said, hey, will you be a beta tester for us? I was like, hell yes, I'll be a beta tester. I'm dying to know more about this. And that's when I started really doing my homework. There is not a ton of cohesive information for the average layperson out there about menopause, what it means, what it is, when it happens. And of the people who are willing to talk about it, most people want to talk to their friends. They don't even
Mhm.
feel comfortable talking to their doctors. And part of the reason for that is doctors don't feel that comfortable talking about menopause. 1 in 4 does not feel comfortable about talking to menopause, to the issue of menopause with their patients. And there's only 2 hours of menopause training in medical school. So, of course, nobody knows about it. Of course, nobody wants to talk about it. And also, we think of menopause as this kind of like past your prime. I'm no
Mhm.
longer fertile. And therefore, there's something about this kind of moment that makes us less relevant, and we start to feel invisible. And the two things that I certainly felt when I started to go through this was a loss of identity, like I don't look like myself, I don't feel
Mhm.
like myself, and a loss of agency, because I didn't know what to do about any of it. Nobody was giving me any answers or any help in a way that I found helpful to my situation. So when I started beta testing for this company, which started out just for menopausal skincare, but in four distinct categories, right? Cooling, which was clearly about hot flashes, hot flushes. Hydration, which was really about what kind of moisture does your skin need? What kind of ingredients does your skin need to kind of retain moisture and not feel so dry? Because your skin can get as dry as almost a pre-diabetic skin dryness, same
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. Um, Relief in terms of the kind of pain that you can experience, like joint pain, muscle fatigue, breast tenderness, and repair, like when your hair starts breaking or your nails get weak or things like that. That was just the tip of the iceberg, right? That's where we started. And I was a super noisy beta tester. You both know me. Like I'm not quiet about my opinions. And so as a beta tester, I was like, listen, guys, this doesn't work. This cream isn't thick enough. This one isn't thin enough. If you're doing a cooling gel that you want to be hydrating, it also has to kind of have other benefits. Like, does it protect against cystic acne or pre-rosacea? Like, what are you doing? Look at all the issues that surround menopause. So when it came time for this company, which was making brands, right? Like State of Menopause was a brand that they owned. They wanted to turn into a tech company based on the kind of custom platforms that they had made for these brands. They felt like that customizable platform was something that they thought they could, just go ahead and sell to other companies. They wanted to find homes for the brands that they created. And the other brand was Gen Z Play. It was genderless deodorant. And I was like, listen, I don't know what to do with that. I use Old Spice or Secret or a natural, whatever I can find. Like, I'm not picky about deodorant,
Mm-hmm.
but I do care very much about State. I care about it. I think that it is limited in its thinking to think that skincare is enough for a menopause product line. And why did I want to take it over when I knew, one, that I was, going to reposition it in the market, first of all, because I thought it was short-sighted to think about menopause as a beauty issue, right? This is a much bigger wellness personal care issue that requires a lot more product than maybe perhaps other verticals, because there is no such thing as a menopause vertical. There is no such thing in the market as a menopause aisle in your pharmacy. There's no such thing as a menopause footprint in Ulta or Sephora or any of the other companies where you find product in that regard. So it was very important to me to think about, what does a menopause ecosystem look like? How are we going to create proprietary product that actually really talks about symptomatic relief, acute symptomatic relief, as opposed to kind of long-term health plays that you're seeing a lot in supplements or in vitamins or daily you know anything from gummies to pills to any of that stuff, right? I was like, what do you grab for in the moment? That's what I want
Mm-hmm.
our company to be about. So I acquired the brand and really took about a year to really understand, even after we did our soft launch, to understand the consumer behavior of this audience, to understand the needs of this audience, to understand the nuances around menopause, not just from a medical point of view, but from a naturopathic point of view, for people who can't take hormones or can't afford hormones, or just don't want to take them because they just don't want to do that, right? Like, what are the other options available to us? Who else is in this market? What other companies are doing this kind of thing? And what I saw was not only an incredible opportunity financially, because the women of this age, if they are coming to it chronologically between 40 and 60, are breadwinners of their households. They are certainly the head of finances in their households. And they are not even being given information to help them make the right choices for themselves. So what I've come to learn about menopause is that it is such a gift, right? It's not, and I don't want to be hokey. That's the last thing. I don't want to be cliche about this. It's a gift because, yes, it's what is the alternative to getting older is like being in the ground, right? We're all lucky to be here. We're all lucky to be
Mm-hmm.
alive. But that doesn't mean that going into middle age and experiencing menopause chronologically between 40 and 60 isn't it's not easy. It's hard. I'm never going to sugarcoat that, but it isn't hopeless and you aren't helpless. And I want to exist as a company to help you remind yourself that you have agency, that you have choices, that there is a proactive approach to this. And more importantly, that menopause actually should be seen not as an ending, but a beautiful biological failsafe that allows you to stop and think, hey, what am I doing with my life now? This is the middle of my life. I'm not dying at 50. We're not dying in childbirth, right? And for the most part, we are, a first world country. We have healthcare. That's not to say that it isn't happening in other parts of the world, but for the most part, the death in childbirth is such a lower rate than it's been, throughout history. And we are living to be in our 80s and 90s. So if you're getting menopause around 48 to 52, that's usually the general time that this is going to happen to you. This is an amazing opportunity for you to take stock of where you are in your life. We don't lead linear lives anymore. Do you want to pivot? Do you want a new career? Are you still raising your children, or is it empty nest syndrome? Are you taking care of your parents in terms of elder care? Are your parents starting to die? This is a very, very loaded time. Middle age is not, sort of the Middle Ages, but it is the middle of life. And you are stuck between kids and parents. You are at that moment where you're at the highest point of, decreased earning potential. It's the highest rate of divorce. It's certainly, Scientific American did a study that said the lowest point of happiness in a woman's life is between 45 and 55. That's not by accident. And that's not just because of menopause, but that's because of all the age adjacencies that go along with it. So why are we not educating ourselves, and why are we not figuring out ways to make this a true opportunity, not just to think about where we want to be and what we want to do with this extra 40 years as our lifespans, continue to expand, but also, what are we doing to safeguard our health so that in our 80s and 90s, we're still vital members of our community, right? What happens in menopause really does trigger a lot of underlying issues for you to safeguard your health, cardiac health, cognitive health, bone health. And I didn't know any of that going into this. Nothing. I didn't know how to take care of myself, and I didn't feel like my doctors were helping me. It's not enough to say, hey, take calcium and make sure you get some vitamin D. These are much bigger issues that we should be thinking about well before we get to menopause. And, that's why I was like, hey, I'm never going to stop being interested in style. I'm never going to stop because it's in my DNA. But to go back to your first question, do I worry about what people are going to say to me on the street if I'm wearing sweatpants now? No, because what I care about isn't just style. What it's turned into, and what I've learned as I've aged, is that wellness is very much a part of the same thing that I have always tried to do, which is create a sense of self-awareness, raise a person's sense of self-esteem, and self-care. First I did it with clothing, and now I'm trying to do it with product. And the reason that I wanted product as opposed to platform first isn't because I don't think community is important, but because there are so many communities desperate for information, education, and product. And it was great to be able to go to these communities with some form of answer, some form of solution. No matter how temporary it might be, management tools are essential during menopause. And a lot of women say to me, oh, I still get my period. I'm not in menopause. And I'm like, well, actually, you're 52 years old. Doesn't matter that you're still getting your period. You're actually in menopause, whether you want to believe it or not. And I can't tell you the resistance that I get to people saying to me, I'm not in menopause. I'm like, it's not something terrible that you have to admit to, even though the FDA does consider and classify menopause as a disease, but they also classify pregnancy as a disease.
Right.
So I think that tells you about who makes up the FDA is a bunch of old white men.
Mm-hmm. This is kind of a tangent taking away from this, but something you talked about really resonated with me since you've redefined your life so many times. And talking about how we are living so much longer, 30, 40 years. What do you envision your life will look like when you're 75? No one, no one's ever.
Yeah. No, nobody has ever asked me that, Amy. And I kind of think it's a great question in a couple of ways, right? What I see for myself is more what I've been talking about for my 50s, right? I was like, oh my God, turning 50, that was a big birthday. And that was I wouldn't say a hard pill to swallow because I really do believe you are never served by looking back at who you were and holding on to that because it disallows you to become who you are and who you could become in the future. So it is very important that your identity is not rooted in something static, like the way that you look or the way that you
Mhm.
feel or the way that you think about your job or the way that you think of your identity. It has to be much deeper than that, and it has to allow for evolution. Life is change. So the minute you start to think like, oh, I wish I still looked like I was 25, you're going down the wrong path because you're never going to be 25 again, right? But what I always saw when I turned 50 was I was like, I am going to take this decade to turn around the mindset that I've always had, the things that I've always looked to for external validation to make me feel like I was worthwhile. That I think a lot of us do, right? In terms of codependence, it's called other esteem, in terms of like codependency in psychology, that we define our own worth by allowing other people or other situations to define our identity. So self-worth really comes from peeling away all of what we consider to be external validation, getting the right job, being in the
Mhm.
right place at the right time, having the right friends, knowing, what kind of influence we have, how we look, how much money we have, all of these things that are external markers of what we consider to be success, instead of what do you know to be true about yourself? What do you love about yourself? And I thought, oh my God, this whole time that I've spent in my life waiting for somebody to tell me, I choose you, right? Whether it was my partner or a television channel or anything else in life. I was like, I'm going to take my 50s and I am going to change my entire mindset where I am the one who does the choosing, that my personal validation is going to come from me, not any external validation. And I am going to take this decade to prove to myself what I'm capable of doing. I don't know what that looks like yet, but that was the goal. That's the horizon for me. I said, by the time I get to 60, I'm not only going to have changed the way that I allow myself to interact with other people, it's going to be on my terms, whatever those terms look like as I evolve. So when you ask me what I think about 75, I actually can't wait. I don't know what it's going to look like. I just know that I will be infinitely more evolved in my thinking than I am right now. And I believe that I will be able to value time and my relationships and whatever work I'm doing even more because as we age, I think time becomes a commodity that's more and more valuable to us. We have less of it to play with. And so by the time I'm 75, I want to be living my life out loud, but I also want to be doing it on my own terms.
You've evolved so much professionally in the last 30 years. How have your romantic relationships evolved?
Oh, I mean, that's something I talk about all the time, right? I dated men, all of my life, and then I was incredibly lucky in 2018 to meet my girlfriend, who now we've been together almost 3.5 years, and I don't know what took me so long. I mean, frankly, I wouldn't say that it was like, oh, it's about being straight or being gay or identifying in any particular way. It's that I fell in love with the best person that I've ever met in my life, and I can't begin to say what that means, right? I think all of us, when we meet our person, no, like in fact, I didn't even know if I knew right away because I was like, oh my God, I'm questioning myself. Is this like a fad? Is this, what is it that I'm doing here? How am I experiencing these feelings? And it's part of the reason that even in 2018, when I hadn't been doing television as regularly, like, I wasn't coming into your living rooms every Friday night anymore. I really wanted to be very careful in the way in which I started to talk about my relationship with Kat because I wanted us to keep it private, not out of any kind of shame. I don't believe in that. But what I did believe was that it would be foolish to be like, I am dating a woman, only to turn around and be like, well, it was a relationship that was nascent that then didn't work out, right? Like why go public with something that would clearly make such a big splash if I wasn't really sure of what I was doing? And the great thing about it was that when I we sort of made a conscious decision, both of us, to say, okay, it's time. I started to see, lots of whisperings on social media about, does Stacy have a really hot girlfriend? And I was like, yeah, I do, but I want to control the narrative. Again, same thing, the way I talk about style. I want to be the one controlling the narrative about what my life looks like and how I'm presenting that to other people. And that's when I announced it on, I think it was the last day of 2019. Yeah. Kat's here, so I'm asking her. It had been a year that we had been together. And I just said, hey, I've seen the gossip, and I'm going to set you straight. Not that it's any of your business, but now that I see that other people are talking about it, it's time that I talk about it. And
Hmm.
I also recognized that it was very easy for me to do this. It was very easy for me to say, I fell in love with this person. I know that I am a white woman of privilege and I don't have an employer. You can't fire me. What is it? You're gonna unfollow me? I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Like there were no consequences. My family loves Kat more than they love me. Like nobody shunned us. Nobody, my dog is no longer my dog. Like she loves Kat more than me. Like I just have come to terms with the fact that people like Kat more than me. That's it. I'm over it. It took me a second, but I'm fine with it. And the bigger issue was that I just recognized that there were no true consequences in the way that the people who have had to fight to be who they are, I only stand on their shoulders. And I am very careful about constantly repeating that, because the people whose families abandoned them and the people who were not allowed to be who they were, or were, violence was committed against them because of who they were, that is not the position that I have been in. I have been in a position only to celebrate my love. And it really reminds me how many people came before me that fought for my right to be able to do that with no consequence. So, I really am very cognizant of that. And even in my relationship with Kat, there's a lot that Kat has taught me about, what it means to have recognized your own sexual identity very young and to feel othered and outside of mainstream society. All of a sudden, I see that in a very different light because that's not what I grew up with. So all of these things, talk about evolution. It certainly informed the way that I start to think about, this idea of othering and what it means when, you aren't a white person of privilege in this country, in this world, in our society. What are we not doing for people? How can we help more for people who feel marginalized? What can we do in order to create more safe spaces? What can we do in order to kind of stop thinking about, this idea of marginalization altogether, right? I very much believe in the word diversity. I do not believe in the word inclusion, because inclusion presupposes there was somewhere to include people in the first place, right? That there was a center that then requires people to be included into. That just reminds us that, it's sort of, this hierarchy of white people thinking that they own the world and that we're now going to include everybody else in it, or that, straight people or cisgendered people. And I think that, part of coming to this relationship in the middle of my life was one of the biggest gifts that I could ever have asked for. Again, always evolving. It's not just evolving in who I fell in love with. It's evolving, Kat has helped open my eyes to a lot of injustice that I have been isolated and insulated from my entire life. That is a remarkable gift when you can have any partner that can do that for you. And it's funny. I found out later, when I was talking with a woman who sort of specializes in menopause and middle age, and she wrote this incredible book. Her name's Heather Karenna, and it's called "What Fresh Hell Is This?" which I just think is a great title for any book on menopause. But she was saying to me that there is a statistic where a lot of women in middle age actually wind up with the opposite sex partner that they had dated most of their lives. So a lot of women start dating men, and a lot of women who had dated men start dating women, which I found really interesting, because I was like, I wonder what the criteria for that is. And for me, it was about having enough self-awareness and knowledge not to be afraid of what might have felt, sort of foreign to me, but being able to lean into that instinct and say, I'm an individual. I am allowed to change. I am allowed to evolve. I'm allowed to experiment and experience in a new way. And I think, obviously when we're younger, we're much more tied to what other people think. And it is interesting. I hope I'm allowed to curse on this podcast, but you can cut it out if
Absolutely.
I'm not. But, I wrote another article for Refinery 29 when I was 47 about the fact that, like, of course my style was going to evolve. Why did I think that I would be wearing pencil skirts and like floral tops and 5-inch heels that I wore on What Not to Wear? At first, I thought that I had to because I didn't want to disappoint people who had watched me on the show. But I was like, that's not me. I want to wear jumpsuits and leather pants. And like, I don't want to wear high heels. I want to wear sneakers. And I want to wear 3-piece suits. Like the minute that that realization came over me, right? One of the things that I kept saying is that, my pockets just have fewer and fewer fucks in them, right? That's where I am. But then another very good friend of mine recently was talking. Her name's Jen Romolini, and I'm sure that you're familiar with her. She has a podcast with Kim
Yes.
France called Everything is Fine. She's also a remarkable writer, and she talks a lot about middle age. And she was quoted recently as saying, I'm not out of fucks to give. I have more and more fucks to give. She was
Mhm.
like, in a lot of ways, she's more passionate about things now than she ever was before. She's more concerned with the things that she's putting out into the world than she ever was before. And so I kind of understand both of those philosophies. In a lot of ways, I am out of fucks to give when it comes to any kind of external validation, but I have way more fucks to give when it comes to what I want to put out into the world, what I want to fight for, who I want to fight for, why I want a company that's mission driven, that is bigger than me, that is bigger than any one group of people, that really speaks to communities that are, not just talking about stigmatized topics, but that once you go down, let's say, the rabbit hole of menopause, you start to see all of the marginalization that gets so much worse. First, we're talking about women or those who identify as women, people who have female reproductive organs, even if they don't identify as women, right? That's already marginalizing people. Then you get to the fact that this is not about just women, this is about ageism, right? One last bastion we have certainly not conquered in our culture. But what is ageism? Ageism is sexism. Anybody who says to you ageism is gendered, I don't know what that means, because I don't see men suffering from aging at all.
No.
I only see
Stacey, I
women
have to
really
ask,
bearing the brunt of it.
I'm sure a lot of our listeners want to know how you and Kat met and fell in love.
Oh, okay. So I'll backtrack a little bit. We met through a mutual friend who brought Kat to a fundraiser that I did with Eliza Reiner, who is an amazing actress and a friend, that we threw a fundraiser for Cynthia Nixon when she was running for governor. And
Mhm.
Kat came, and I really, I feel very strongly about this recollection. Right, babe? You agree with me on this one. Um, we met, our friend introduced us, and we shook hands. And Kat held on to my hand, and the first thing she ever said to me was, "Oh, wow, you're so beautiful." And I remember thinking, "Oh, it's
Wow.
on. It's on. Like, whatever this
Oh,
is, it's on." And we didn't have our first date for a while. And also, I met Kat when my dad was really, really sick. And one of the first things that I said to her was, I am happy to make plans, but there's only a 50% chance on any given day that I will actually be able to come to them. Right. I'm so honored to be invited to anything. But the fact is that if my dad needs me, I have to go there. So sometimes I'm going to cancel last minute. And I said that to all of my friends. I really tried to be as open and honest about what was going on with me at that time as possible. And Kat and I got to hang out a few times. But then I remember we spent the marathon day together, which was November 3rd, right, that year. The third. I think it was the third. I'm asking Kat for confirmation here, but I think it was November 3rd. Our mutual friend who had introduced us, was running in the marathon. I have great friends who throw a marathon party every year that I always go to because the marathon is one of the most joyous days in New York City, in my opinion.
yeah,
So we
agree.
spent the day together. And we had the best day. Like, we saw our friend, we like high-fived her when she was running the marathon. We hung out, we had a great time, walked home together. And Kat had said to me on the 3rd, "Hey, my birthday is November 9th. I would love for you to come to my birthday dinner." And I said, "I would love to." And that day, I had to call her and say, my dad is sick and I can't come. And one of the saddest and most poignant things I about our relationship was that my dad died the next day. He died on November 10th.
Mm.
And not only did Kat come to the funeral, which like completely blew my head off. She never got to meet my dad, which is like one of the greatest regrets of my life. Um, but I also knew that I was like dealing with incredibly kind individual, somebody who would show up for me without really knowing me or knowing where our relationship was going to go. To be supportive in that way was really, really remarkable. She also was
Sorry,
wearing
I'm
like super
crying.
dope
Amy and I are
lipstick.
both crying, which is very rare that we both cry at the same time. Usually
Oh,
it's just one of us. It's so sweet. And bizarrely, Amy, don't you agree? Like we've had a lot of guests on our show fall in love with women after years of dating men. It's something about our show or the
We
guests
have.
we
We actually talk
choose.
about
I
it.
don't know.
yeah. Is it really? That's like I actually I love that.
Mhm.
I really think there is something to that. You know, this idea in midlife, also feeling more free. But I will also say that I look at younger generations, and one of the things that I felt really strongly about, certainly as a Gen Xer, was that I didn't want to be like my grandfather, right? I didn't want to be one of these people like, oh, these young whippersnappers, they're all so entitled and they all expect to be, they all want $1 billion valuated companies by the time they're 25. Like, who are they?
Mhm.
But I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to stand in judgment in that way. And I had to do some real, not just soul searching, but like really think about why older generations are so stuck in their ways that any generation that comes after us or that's younger than us feels like they're filled with folly or entitlement. Like, what is that? What is that? Because our generation is the only generation that sits squarely between the industrial revolution and the digital revolution. Like, I don't know about you ladies, but I had a rotary phone when I was a kid in my apartment, right? Like, that is the stuff that I remember. I remember life when it was less complicated. I remember when print was king. I remember when television became important. Now I know what digital and social media has done. And now we've got streaming channels, right? What has changed? What has made younger people feel like they can skip a lot of the work that we had to get to a certain place in our lives? Why is it that younger people don't feel like they need to define a gender for themselves or a sexuality for themselves? What is that about? And part of it, I think, comes from the speed with which things happen for them now, right? We are not
Yeah.
digitally native generations. So when we look at the fact that you can Google anything, that you can know about something in 5 seconds if you choose to, it's really that time is perceived differently by younger people. And it's much easier for them to accept things, to experiment with things, to investigate things, because there's no lag time for them. So effort means something completely different to them than it does to us. They perceive time differently. And it really does mean, if you think about perceiving time more quickly, look at how much more progress can be made when you aren't sort of sitting in your own, do I do this? Do I not do this? Should I research this? Do I, all of the things that we used to do, younger kids aren't doing. So I look to younger generations, not just for, I wouldn't say permission, but as an example of what multi generational mentorship can look like. And I learned a lot from my younger friends who were dating women and men who weren't thinking about gender, but thinking about the person they were falling in love with. And really feeling this sense of even transparency, being more honest, and not having to pretend like I was perfect or that I was an authority just because I was on television. It allows for fallibility in a way. Younger generations, I think, allow for fallibility in a way that, as I was growing up, I did not feel that I was afforded. And I felt that I was meant to compete against women my age. Only one person could win. Only one person got the best job. Only one person got the best partner. All of these things that are absolutely ludicrous when I think about them now, that those were just constructs of our own imaginations. And you can see how big a shift there is in society now. We can see where we're headed to so much more kind of open minded thinking. So the idea that, after dating men for, decades, that I would fall in love with a woman and feel more loved and seen than I ever have in my life, really is just one of the happiest circumstances that's come out of my journey.
So, Stacy, we're going to go to the speed round now where we're just going to ask you
Great.
quick questions and you give us quick answers. Amy, do you want to try to start?
Yeah. What book right now?
You know what? I wish I knew the title of it because I haven't started it, but it's right next to my bed. So hold on. I think it's called, hold on. It's called Bending Reality, How to Make the Impossible Probable by Victoria Song. And this was just given to me by a really good close friend.
Great. And what show are you binging right now?
Ozark.
Me too.
I finished it. I'm
It's so good. Did you all finish the 7 episodes?
No,
I
I'm
did.
in the middle.
Season
Don't say
4?
a word.
Okay, I won't say a word. God damn it. I just want to talk about it with everybody.
I want to talk about it. We can talk about it after I'm done.
Okay, Amy, we'll talk about it after. Okay. I don't want to spoil it for Sam.
Yep. What is your morning routine?
Well, it's really interesting that you say that because I've just changed my morning routine. Usually it would be that I would stay in bed, get my phone, read the news, get depressed, and then get up. And now both Kat and I would just be like, oh God, another day in hell. But now I get up, I try to breathe or meditate for 5 minutes, 5, right? I used to do Vedic meditation, 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon. That doesn't feel doable for me right now as the CEO of a startup. I am a busy lady. So I try to do 5 minutes of breathing or meditating, 5 minutes of writing in my journal, 5 minutes of reading a book that matters to me, that fills me. And then I'll read the news and then I get to work. And I really do try to do that as much as possible now because it has legitimately that extra 15 minutes. Like I know people who have like an hour, 2 hour ritual in the morning. 15 minutes just to start me off on the right path of the day has changed really astronomically the way that my days feel.
We can't end without talking about your hair. Tell us about, you were the face of Pantene. You were known for that gray streak in your hair. Tell us about your hair today and what it takes to maintain it.
Well, I don't do anything to maintain it. I'm not going to lie. It's this, my gray streak is obviously I have a lot more gray than I used to, but I've had it since I was about 11 and a half. So I've never, ever considered getting rid of it. In fact, part of my Pantene contract, I was like, you can cut my hair, you can style my hair, but you cannot dye my gray streak. Like that will never happen. And they were fine with that. But, part of it was that I've never associated it with age. I was like, I am like a cartoon character. I'm like Cruella de Vil. I'm like Rogue from X-Men. Who doesn't want that kind of recognition? I want to be, it's like, and when Broad City did, there was a scene where they were talking about the fact that I can't remember their names anymore. It's Alana and Abby. When Abby is talking about having one gray hair, their best friend says, you're like Judi Dench or Stacy London from What Not to Wear. You're ascending. I was like, I've never been more culturally relevant in my whole goddamn life. I was so happy. And actually, I ran into Abby at a party and I said, thank you for making me so culturally relevant.
Well, Lou has been listening to our whole interview, and he always comes in with the final and usually the best question from the male perspective.
Oh, bring it.
Oh, yeah. First off, I really, really enjoy your insightful answers to all our questions. It was just incredible.
Thank you.
It was
you so
really
much.
incredible. Just because I got this idea that every time somebody is talking, you get a chance to actually hear what they're thinking. So I get a chance to get inside your head, and you have a lot going on up there.
Let me just say 2 things about that. One, I did go to Vassar for philosophy, psychology, and literature. So again, yeah, I definitely like thinking. But also, I'm a Gemini, so there are a lot of me in here, and we're all doing a lot of thinking at the same time. It's like why I don't have a favorite color because none of us in here can decide. So that's how I think.
Awesome.
There's a lot going on up here.
That's incredible. But one of the answers Well, actually, you kind of did a great way of segueing into it. When you started talking about menopause, I was like, "What the? What?" It was very fascinating, and now I got some YouTube videos to look at, right?
Mm.
But I was just thinking, damn, women go through some shit. I was just in
You
my
know,
heart like, that's it. I'm sorry, but yeah.
yeah,
Go
no,
ahead.
no, no. Actually, it's really interesting that you say that because I think that in a lot of ways, um, I've started writing a kind of a menopause memoir, and I'm just going to share with you what I'm thinking about calling it right now, right? Which is hysterical. And part of the
Oh,
reason is that women are constantly being accused of being hysterical, right?
Mm-hmm.
yes.
And there's something incredibly funny about that to me. But what that is truly based on, right, is that through this kind of patriarchal lens, where just physiologically, men's hormones don't fluctuate as much or in the same way over our lifespans, the way uh, women's hormones do physiologically, we have placed a value judgment on hormonal fluctuation as more hormonal fluctuation is bad and less hormonal fluctuation is
It's
good.
good.
And that
Wow.
somehow being, more hormonally
Stable.
challenged in terms of that
Yeah.
fluctuation, right? And not being so rigid somehow has given people permission to say, well, you're hysterical. You're being hysterical. And I'm like, that's not what it is at all. It's that women's physiology is not understood well enough for
Yes.
us to really understand why hormonal changes create a ripple effect in the way that we behave, in the way that we're seen, in the way that, nobody understands female reproductive health in the way that we should, because it isn't just about reproduction, it's about hormones. So for
Yeah.
me, this idea that women are hysterical is such a bunch of shit.
I look forward
Anyway, that's
to
where I
listening
am.
or hearing it or watching it or reading it when it comes out because it's going to give men, and this leads into my question, but it's going to give men who get a chance to subscribe to an understanding of women. So my
Mhm.
question is how can a man support a woman in their lives that are going through these transitional phases of premenopausal, menopausal, and then postmenopausal?
Oh, okay. First of all, Lou, I mean, really, yes. Let's see. Can we just all clap and be like, it's
Yeah.
such an incredible question. And it is actually one of the pillars that I talk about when I talk about my brand, which is called State of Menopause, right? There are certain things that this brand and the mission that we have is to do. And, I would say it's destigmatized for sure, right? We
Okay.
want to destigmatize menopause so people are
I'm
just
taking
not
notes, by the
afraid of
way.
it, right? In the same way. We want to contextualize it so that you understand that menopause is not this final frontier. We want to contextualize it in the lifespan of hormonal health, right? So that you understand why it belongs in the conversation at every stage of life, that this is something you should know and
Yes.
expect before it happens. We want to normalize that conversation. And when I say normalize it, that's different than destigmatizing it. That means it should be very easy for you to find care practitioners and doctors that are willing to kind of talk you through it. But even more importantly, friends, significant others, partners, kids, all of your family members and friends, really to kind of have that communication open so that you can ask for the help that you need while, going through some issues that may actually be quite stressful. And, men understand andropause, right, which is a lot less complicated. There are really only two symptoms that surround it. It's erectile dysfunction and hair loss. And, we joke around, what do men do when they're having a midlife crisis? They like take Rogaine and Viagra, get a sports car and a younger girlfriend. But like we have 34 symptoms at the same time, and yet it's the highest rate of divorce for us. We're not
What?
having, yeah, we're perceived as having a midlife crisis and that we have to white knuckle through it instead of actually being able to get to the other side and have a midlife renaissance. And that's where
Wow.
men can truly be helpful, where we
Mm-hmm.
can, men and women both, but should be able to look at aging as in a really proactive, positive way, that women should be allowed to age, that we should be loved for being allowed to age, that having wrinkles and, not having the same body you had at 25 does not make you less attractive or appealing in any way. And men need to remember that that is actually something that matters in the way that we talk about this, and that we should be afforded the same kind of respect at any age. But also, again, to optimize this conversation, optimizing this conversation is about creating companies like mine, creating products like mine, giving options to women and for men to be able to understand what those options are, so that as a family, you can make choices about what's going to be best for the woman in your life. And then I talk about democratizing them, right? Democratizing products and platforms so that it's not just a cisgender, hetero white woman middle class problem, because that's not what this is, right? There are people who are going to be struggling with mental health during menopause, anxiety and depression, and menorage. Some women have suicidal
Menorage.
ideation. Yeah.
What?
So these are things that feel incredibly important to understand. So you are not thinking like, why is mom angry at me? Mom's not angry at you. Mom is struggling through hormonal changes. Why am I fighting with my partner? Well, it's not because you don't love your partner. It's because you're going through hormonal changes. These need to be understood and respected. And therefore, everybody is communicating on like a level playing field. So, Lou, this question is essential. Men have to be a part of this conversation. They must. Everybody
Yes.
has to be a part of this conversation.
In a major way. Yes. Wow. When you said normalize, I was thinking about something you said earlier too. There's no section in the pharmacy or the department store for menopause.
That you bet, and I'm going to change that.
Yeah.
If I do nothing else, that I am definitely going to change that. I also want to go up against the FDA. I'm like, I don't want you to classify menopause or pregnancy as diseases. That needs to be declassified. We need to talk about the policy that surrounds that, because if you classify menopause as a disease, it stops us from being able to sell product that is actually
Stacey,
helpful
you
and
should do
beneficial
that
to
right
people.
away, because that would be actually incredible for marketing of your company, but also it would be a legacy that would change everything.
Yeah.
Believe me
Stacey,
when I tell you, if I didn't think that the FDA had some bigger things on their plate right now, I
Right.
would go for it. As soon as
Right.
we are past like the real health crisis that our country has been in for the last couple of years, that the world has been in, I am absolutely.
well, that's a hard interview to sum up. So Stacy is so many different things. And I think, I was super fascinated to hear her conversations on middle age and menopause, because it really is like, once you start thinking about it, like this is something literally every woman goes through and we just don't talk about it. But I wish we'd gotten to dive more into her childhood.
Yeah, I think that Stacy, she grew up in New York City. She, like I did, and she definitely has kind of like a tough city girl mentality, which I think actually is the thread that took her from being this like fashion icon who strongly stated their opinion but also was beloved by her fans, to now almost becoming an advocate for middle-aged women to say the rest of your life is going to be the best of your life. And I love that. And I'm excited. She makes me excited about menopause. I know that sounds ridiculous, but like, she does make it seem super fun. I mean, she like met the love of her life after she went into menopause, not like I'm like, bring it on. Like, please delay that stuff for as long as I can. But I'm just saying, like, she does make it seem like, the 50s are awesome.
Yeah, but like maybe that is like her continuation of that kind of tough girl thread, Sam, right? Of like reimagining what we've been told is like, frankly, kind of like the end for women. Like we just don't even really talk. Now we do, but maybe like 20 years ago, a woman who's over 50, you're like, eh. But now it's like we have decades of our career left, a new love life, like all of these things.
Yeah, there's I think that, I keep saying I'm turning 50 this year, and I was excited to throw a glass half full party because I feel like I've halfway through my life, and everyone's like, that's so optimistic. I'm like, but don't you all think you're going to live to 100? Like, I just always assume that. But
Yeah.
now with COVID, my plans are delayed. So maybe it'll be a 51-year-old party. But I do think that the more people that talk about things like aging in such a positive way, the more resources we'll have and the stronger we'll feel when we get to that point. So kudos to Stacy, and she has a lot to say. I feel like we could have heard from her for hours longer.
Completely. Thanks for listening to What's Her Story with Sam and Amy.
We would appreciate it if you'd leave a review wherever you get your podcast. And of course, connect with us on social media at What's Her Story Podcast.
What's Her Story with Sam and Amy is powered by my company, The Riveter, at theriveter.co, And Sam's company, Park Place Payments, at parkplacepayments.com.
Thanks to our producer, Stacey Para, and our male perspective, Lou Burns.